Good morning. My name is Neal Hurst, and I am the Associate Curator of Costume and Textiles here at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. And this morning we're standing in the upper bedchamber here at the Everard House, looking at this wonderful gown here. It's on display for our year-long installation, talking about Martha Everard and Dr. Isaac Hall's wedding that took place in 1774. When we first started talking about this exhibition here in this building, one of the things that we knew we wanted to do was to put a gown on display. And so Amanda Keller charged me with looking at our collection and trying to find a suitable gown that we could interpret here in the Everard House. And so I knew of one that would actually work pretty well, and that's the gown, the reproduction of it you see right here before us. This gown, the original piece, which we will link in the description down below to our e-museum, came to the collection in 1946 with a history of it being worn by Frances Norton. Now, Frances Norton married John Baylor IV on November 18th, 1778 in London, but both of them were actually born here in Virginia, and in fact they probably knew each other fairly well as they were cousins. But in 1779, they actually came back to Virginia at the tail end of the American Revolution and resettled in Newmarket, Virginia, bringing the original gown back with them, along with John Baylor IV's original wedding suit. So in 1946, if we speed forward in time a little bit, the descendants of the Baylors gave not only the wedding suit, but also the wedding gown to Colonial Williamsburg as a gift, and they still remain here today as really treasured objects from the past. Now, this gown is a little bit later than what we'd expect Martha Everard to be wearing. And it's a great gown to sort of delve into the height of fashion in 1778, just 4 years after Martha would have been married here in Williamsburg. The gown itself, unfortunately, survives in not very good shape. And so I knew it would be a great candidate for us to study, to take a pattern off of, so that way in the future less hands can actually handle it and it can just stay as a study piece within our collection here at Colonial Williamsburg. So I was able to pull the gown out, take a full pattern off of everything you see here. We have the petticoat and the gown that survives, and then provide any additional information to our mantua makers who are in the trades department here at Colonial Williamsburg for them to actually reproduce this gown. Because the gown itself, unfortunately, in the early days, went to a restorer by the name of Ernest Linano, who did some work on the gown. An early technique of these restorers was to use sections to patch other areas of the gown where there were losses, a technique that we no longer use today here at Colonial Williamsburg. And so areas of the trim, particularly going down the front here, were lost. They were used to patch large areas of the gown, but we knew they were there because of sort of the holes that were left behind from where the original stitching was actually done. So after doing all the patterning, figuring out what trim was missing, we handed off that pattern off to the mantua makers, and they were able to find a suitable silk, like the one you see here, of a pretty close color. The antique, I think, has probably faded a little bit more of a light buttery cream color. And then also able to make some sort of recommendations on areas that we just have completely no information on. Things like the sleeves and the sleeve treatments. They was completely lost, unfortunately, even by the time it arrived to Colonial Williamsburg, and why, we just don't know. So the milliners and the mantua makers were able to make all the gown itself, all the accessories that you see here, and to make a really one-to-one copy, stitch for stitch, mistake for mistake, from the antique that survives in our collection. Now, for a gown in 1778, as I said before, this is the height of fashion. It is the new center front closing style of gown, which has just started coming out. Probably Martha Everard would have worn a stomacher front gown, which would have had robings coming down either side of the shoulder with that triangular piece that would have then closed the center front. 1774 is just when this sort of new center front style would have been coming out. The gown itself also is looped up onto itself. We can see that just a little bit on the side over here. The evidence for that is lost in terms of the loops and the tapes themselves to draw up the gown, or perhaps even the buttons that would have been on the outside of the gown itself. But we do know that the trim that you see here on the bottom of the gown goes completely around the hem. and that is great evidence that this gown would have looped up onto itself. The gown itself is an English back gown, or a fitted back gown, so it's not a sack back with those loose flowing pleats. And as I said before, for 1778 in London, this would have been the height of fashion. Now, hopefully, if you get a chance to come visit Colonial Williamsburg here in the near future, you'll be able to come see the wedding gown itself, but also take some time to explore our e-museum and look at the original gown that is on display, that's been mounted and photographed, and all of this research has been updated on that e-museum. Thank you all very much for visiting us here in the Everard, and we hope to see you soon.